Raw living is a state of mind, a way of being in alignment with your body. Raw living means you put yourself and your body first. Your host, Geeta Sidhu-Robb, is the founder of Nosh Detox, located in the UK. They offer innovative raw food smoothies sold across Europe. You experience it in your skin, your body, and your mind. And now it's time for Living Raw Radio.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Living Raw Radio. I clearly can't speak today. It's not looking good for the rest of the show. Living Raw Radio. And I'm your host, Geeta Sidhu-Robb. And we're going to have a really interesting chat today because we're going to take the climate for where we are today in life as people and with everything that we're going to do. We're going to talk to a really good friend of mine who happens to specialize in something really quite particular. You know how people specialize in different things. You have a friend who's a really good cook. Somebody else has a friend who's a great driver. You have other friends who are good at patchwork. Well, my very good friend happens to be a spectacular divorce lawyer, which you'd think would come in really useful in life, wouldn't you? She's a really interesting person and just happens to be really brilliant at this. I'm trying to read here. Ayesha Vardag is somebody who has won so many accolades, and I'm trying to look at them. She's won a scholarship for going to university. She has won enormous numbers of awards while she's actually been working. She's sort of like the diva of divorce. Yes, I like that. That's a good expression. And she's somebody who, when you speak to her, makes you feel warm, fuzzy, like finally somebody stood up and they're on your side and they're here to look at you and what you're doing and how you feel. And you just feel like the world's got to be right when Ayesha's on your side. So she's just one of those amazing people. And I thought that this is not something that women are very good at. We're not great at looking at finances. We're not great at looking at our relationships. And suddenly you turn around one day and think, oh, dear, I'm stuffed. I'm on my own. I don't know how to cope. I don't know what to do. He says, she says, and it's really quite hard. So I thought having a conversation about divorce, having a conversation about marriage, having a conversation about settlements and what we do and why we do it and how we do it is just a really good thing to do. And it's interesting as an axiom that divorce lawyers tend to be very pro-marriage in many ways. So it's, I think, going to be a really interesting conversation. So, Ayesha, are you there?
Hello. Yes, I am. Thank you very much. How do I follow that introduction? I feel as if I
was laughing at it. When I was saying it, I was thinking quite funny to have somebody introducing you like that and knowing you're listening to it.
Yeah.
But it is something that I find really interesting because, you know, you do meet a lot of people that when they've met life's tragedies again and again, they kind of get very hard. And they get very better, and they get that really sort of flat-eyed look. And when you say, well, what about this? Like, well, really? What did you expect? And they get very flippant about pain. And it's something that I've always had a great deal of respect that you've never got there. You believe in love and happiness and fairy tales. I mean, you really do, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. I think that the only way to be happy as a divorce lawyer, indeed a family lawyer, is to believe in love and marriage and families, and that's why you get involved in the activity. It's an incredibly satisfying profession because you're dealing with people's personal lives and their problems and their dramas and their stories. And it wouldn't be interesting if it were all about hatred and anger and violence and abuse. What's interesting is that so much of it comes from love. A lot of it's about people's love for their children and their desire to protect them. A lot of it's about people's pain because of the frustrated or wasted love that they've experienced and having had it break down. But what's most fulfilling about it is trying to get people out of that state of despair and ground zero that they arrive at when everything collapses around their ears, and into looking at the future, into a sort of safe, steady place from which they can start to rebuild and start to have their future. And it's very satisfying when you have people coming in looking completely distraught and destroyed by what's happened to them. And then over the time that you work with them, you see them become stronger, more confident. They start looking more attractive. They start having a voice and being empowered and doing more things for themselves, things they've never really been allowed to do, and they suddenly discover they can do. So that's the happy thing. And then eventually you see them able to go off and form other relationships and rediscover that you can love somebody and hopefully not get hurt in the same way. So
well,
yes, I'm a champion of happy endings.
Yes, no, I can imagine. But when you hear this again and again, aren't there certain things that you sort of have heard so many times that you can't quite believe it?
You do hear a lot of the same stories. There are patterns that emerge, and there are certain things that you hear quite a lot. You hear certain things from men, and you hear certain things from women, and they do sort of fall into groups. For women, you very often hear that their husband has been very controlling of them, that he's wanted to suppress their ideas, that he's been very undermining or insulting, and sometimes physically, sometimes emotionally abusive, and that they have become sort of smaller and smaller, and they've learnt to respond and to be, but by giving in, and have just sort of chipped away little bits of themselves over time, and that's a very common theme. For men, you have a very common theme that the woman that they married, the woman they fell in love with, who was independent and feisty and fun and would sort of engage with them as an equal, after they got married, had children, and then suddenly all the sex, all the fun, all the intellectual interaction, all the interest in them as a person disappeared, and was all of that enthusiasm and interest was channeled into looking after the children and being involved with the school community and the mummy community, so that the biggest topic of conversation was, what happened to Jimmy's socks, which weren't in his gym bag when it came home. And so these are probably the two most common threads that I see coming through, and the two big pitfalls that the men and women who'd like to try and keep their marriages alive would well to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that those are certainly mistakes you don't make, because you'd have heard it so many times. You're just thinking, oh my gosh, really never going to make that happen.
You try to. It's always
exactly.
To give other people advice and to follow it oneself.
Yes, physician heal thyself, isn't it? It's always doctors that when they're sick. Yeah. So, but you came to this in a really interesting way, because you came to this in the course of your own divorce, isn't that right?
Yeah. That's right. Yes, I'd been in the city in London and Moscow in an international law firm, and then I was at the bar and training as a barrister, and then my divorce hit, and I went to one of the then leading divorce lawyers and worked quite a lot on it myself, because I was a divorce lawyer, and because I was a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, and became interested in it. And then when it was all over, and I went out to dinner with my divorce lawyer, he said, well, I'm a bit busy. Why don't you come and join me? And I converted over and retrained in that field, which is that's now well over a decade ago, and just found my niche because it was so human. It was so much more interesting than working with numbers and bond issues and corporate transactions. It was people who really permanently did. Yeah. And it's that capacity to be able to transform people's lives, which is what sort of gets you up in the morning.
But do you think that yeah, no, I can agree. I can imagine that's a heck. I'm a lawyer by background, so I'm so with you on that.
You're a corporate lawyer, aren't you, in fact?
Yes, I am, and I really just couldn't have found anything drier than a stick of wood, personally. So it's like, somebody shoot me now.
Yeah.
What's your view on that, though? Do you think people get divorced too quickly? Is there such a thing? Do we not try hard enough? Are our parents right?
It varies enormously. You have people who try much too hard and give too much and hang in there too long, partly because they're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of what would happen if they go out there. Some of them, some of the women that I speak to particularly have had their husbands telling them that they're very unattractive, that if they were without them, nobody would put up with them. They're so difficult, nobody else would put up with you. and they're made to feel very unlovable, so they stay in a very unhappy relationship because they believe that that's the best that they can get, it's the best they can deserve, and if they're not in it, then they're just going to be alone. So you have people who stay in much too long, and there are also people, yes, who don't try hard enough, who don't deal with the sort of the dramas and difficulties of getting to know someone and getting past the first very lovely, fluffy phase into the more difficult phase when everybody's sort of jostling and jockeying for position and can't sort of fight their way past that and can't compromise, because inevitably there's a huge amount of compromise involved in making any relationship work. The thing is, it's got to be a relatively balanced give and take kind of compromise, and as long as you're there and you're both compromising in order to make it work, then it's all fine. People do need to work through that, but also they need to know when to stop, when the balance is completely gone. There's no compromise, it's just exploitation or unhappiness, and they need to know when to call a halt and have the confidence to take that leap of faith and know that they can get out and they can rebuild themselves.
I suppose there's a place where it just sort of tips over into being toxic, isn't it? And when you're in it, it's really hard to know, because there isn't a day where it suddenly becomes toxic. It's a gradual process. It's first this step and then the next step and then the next step. And you look back and you think, oh my gosh, if only there was a sat-nav that worked, that would be a whole different thing. See, there's a great business idea, marriage sat-nav. You are going the wrong way. Turn around now.
Yeah, turn around when possible. That's right, exactly.
It does, just for my own interest, are you capable now, bearing in mind your experience and the work you've done, of looking at couples and thinking, oh gosh, really don't bother, or gosh, this is really going to go the whole hog and they're going to last?
I mean, I think I have a certain degree of feel for it, having seen all the breakups and the different types of people that have broken up. I certainly have a strong feel for couples that seem to be able to make it work. I mean, I saw a couple get married, a very dear friend, or a pair of dear friends get married the other day, and you could just sort of feel the love, but also the mutual respect and admiration and the enjoyment they had in each other, and they've been together a very long time, actually, and it was utterly lovely. It was one of the most emotional experiences, really, and being there with their friends who all loved them very much, and their families as well, seeing and this sort of real sharing within their community of something that was very deeply rooted and part of them, and that was wonderful. And then you see marriages, I mean, some of them are very obvious, the marriage where you have a certain degree of exploitation or of some form or another that's built into it, whether it's that one side has money and the other side has youth and beauty, or those sorts of transactions effectively. Some of them can work because people make those compromises stick, but very often you see them as doomed to failure, because eventually somebody is in a position to get out. They've got what they want out of that relationship. So either the youth and beauty has faded, or the money's already been sort of clocked up and logged and can be accessed via divorce. And then that transaction comes to an end.
That's awful. That's so cynical.
Well, it's not cynical, because those relationships happen. Just not all relationships are like that. But we all see those relationships around us.
It's true.
And I see quite a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm sure you have more than your average share, I'd say. Do you think that a lot of the landscape has changed because so many more women work now, and they're more independent financially? Like although my mother did work, but women were so much less financially independent. So do you think that that's had a change?
It has generated huge change, because women who are suffering are much less willing to stay and put up with it. They don't have the fear anymore. Very generous divorce law, that did something to give women an exit strategy if they needed one. But where there isn't enough money to access, or they believe that their husband's going to be able to cook things up, or is just going to be left without access to funds to share with them on the divorce. They really have to know that they can make a career for themselves and stand on their own 2 feet, so that they can look after themselves, look after their children, and having careers is absolutely the passport for women to being able to get out when enough is enough.
And so you'd be an advocate of it. You'd encourage it.
Yes. Yeah,
but you don't think that
so.
Impacts us as parents, because does it impact this generation of children that that we're not there as much for them as mothers?
Well, of course, that's the downside, is not being there, not being there to unpack the gym bag and find out whether Jimmy socks are in there or not. Not being there.
I want to know about whether you've had gym socks go missing recently. I really want.
I just don't even know if my daughter's gym socks have gone missing, because this is one of the things I miss out on. But not being there to do all the prep and to do all the bedtimes. That's a very imperfect thing. But the big thing that one does have to remember, well, I think it's twofold. One is having that independence. So if things get bad, you can stand on your feet, you can look after your children, you can make things work for them so that they have a decent life, and you're not dependent on anybody else to do that. That's one thing. And the other thing that's incredibly important is we all pretty much recognize that our children will grow up rather like us. They will follow our example. If we speak harshly, they will speak harshly. If we're kind and fun, they will be kind and fun. If we go out and make careers for ourselves and make a place for ourselves in the world, we can expect that they will too. And so one can expect that one's daughters will grow up. If you're a working woman, you can expect your daughter's going to grow up and become a professional, or an entrepreneur, or a somebody who stands up and takes her own place in the world, and that's what she expects. You can expect that your sons, who are already going to be planning to do that because the world's already geared up for them, but they'll want to marry women like that. That'll be their idea of what a sort of whole woman is. And so there's that's something that the role model issue is a very important one. I don't want to sort of cast aspersions on the role of someone who decides that their career is going to be being just a fantastic mother, and they're going to devote themselves to bringing up their children in the absolutely optimal way. But it's a very conscious choice, and you've got to do that knowing that you can expect that your daughters are going to follow that path, and your sons are going to marry women who are going to follow that path. And if that's the plan, then that's great, and be supportive of that. But you can't expect. I think it's very difficult to expect your daughter to go off and become Secretary General of the United Nations, or Prime Minister, or CEO of Apple, if you've been at home cooking and cleaning and mending throughout her childhood. And I think people forget about that, actually.
Well, I mean, yes, and the concept of that as a role model is alternately petrifying and inspiring, really, because then we will have children between you and I that are interesting in their own right. But there are also children that grow up looking at their parents and thinking, I will do the exact opposite.
Yes, I think I think if children are pressured into things, or if it works very badly, then yes, they might well end up doing the opposite. Yeah, you're quite right. But if you can make it work so that everybody's happy, and my experience has been that the children, they go off to school during the day, they do their thing, they come back. They're with you have to be really careful about the childcare that you have. But they come back, and if you've arranged it right, they come back to their beloved nanny, who's all happy and fun with them and is all devoted to looking after them. And rather than to a rather frazzled, rather sort of bored, I imagine myself, rather frazzled, rather fed up, and when my daughter comes back. And then when I come home, we have long, fabulous chats. We hang out by the fire, we read books, we go and ride ponies. We spend all sorts of fun time. And she asks me about my work. She wants to see me on the TV. She wants to read about what I've done. She's proud of me. And that's a very exciting thing for us to have. And,
yes.
I talk to her about how she can do anything in the world that she wants, and she believes me. So I think, that's the upside. If it's an unhappy situation, then yes, people will try to react against it. Or if they get pushed in one direction or another, they'll try to react against it. But from my point of view, if you have a happy living example of how things can work, then your children will tend to follow it.
What if you're looking at? I mean, one of the biggest casualties of divorce does tend to be the children on a fairly regular basis, because it's becoming, I think, more and more aware as a problem that people are having to take into account. So do you find this? Do you find that more people are coming in going, please, can we just look after the kids no matter what? Can we put them first?
Yes. That's usually the most important thing for everyone getting divorced. How they're going to manage their time with the children, how the children are going to be. Most couples actually manage to agree this between them. It's in the minority of cases that there's a real conflict, but when there is a conflict, it's the most bitter conflict, the most painful conflict. It's always very distressing when one side or another tries to use that for leverage in the financial proceedings, and that happens quite a lot. You'll have a mother who says, well, he's fine as a father. There's actually no problem with him, but I want to restrict his contact because I want to punish him for what he did to me when he went off and caused me all this pain. I'm going to what he doesn't deserve to have any contact with his children, and then the children suffer enormously because they're deprived of contact with a beloved father. And or equally, when sometimes you have fathers who will say, I don't really want half the time with the kids, but can you just say that I do, to put pressure on her, and then it might get her to cave in on the money proceedings, and that's absolutely anathema as well. But we're very much against that. I'm very strongly in favor of children having a good relationship with both their parents when those parents are going to be okay for them. It's obviously different when you've got people who are toxic or abusive or causing children distress. But as between, irrespective of the conflict between father and mother, it's just very important when they can for the children to see both their parents, and I'm very strongly in favor of that.
I mean, do you think that the way that we get divorced in this country is of course that you need to cite irreconcilable differences, and you need to explain why you're getting divorced, basically, in layman's terms? I mean, surely that polarizes people. Doesn't it make people sit in different corners and think, well, we all know that, don't we? The minute you say something, you want to believe it's true, no matter how wishy-washy you were on it before you stated it. So when you actually say to somebody, come here, tell me why you want to leave this person, you end up hanging on to that position for dear life, don't you?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yes, we don't have the simple, we have to get divorced because of irreconcilable differences. We have to spell it all out. We have to say, yes, he was at fault because he did this and that, and you kind of virtually make it up as you go along, or it's more that pretty much, as one judge said, every couple by the end of the first day of their honeymoon has the facts that they could use for a divorce. Because it's so, that the courts will just effectively grant a divorce on the basis of quite light things, simply because the reality is people will get divorced when they want to get divorced, and you just have to recognize it. But there's no political will to change the law so that you can have no fault divorce, so you can just have divorce by consent or divorce on demand. Because as soon as there's any suggestion of that, whichever party suggested is immediately accused of being the party that hates marriage and is going to destroy the fabric of society as we know it. And so nobody can ever suggest it. So we're stuck with this antiquated system of fault where you have to have somebody who is the victim and setting out their faults, and the other person who's choosing to defend against these allegations of fault or just accept them, and it all has to be like that. And as you say, it's very insightful actually. What you have said that as soon as you say something, as soon as you make an allegation, you then really want to hang on to it. As soon as you sort of crystallize something into words, you're very reluctant to. One is very reluctant to back down, and so it really entrenches people's positions. It makes them feel much worse about each other than they would have done if they'd been willing to or been able simply to say, look, we want to call it a day. It's not working out. We just want to get out.
And it must be terrible when you've got places where you've got the kind of controlling relationship, because it makes whoever's alpha want to become much, much more alpha. And if you've got somebody with a victim complex, it's really going to play to their strengths, isn't it? Because it's going to be, I'm like this, you're like that.
Yeah, it's a really unhelpful dynamic. And when you're then trying to achieve agreement about how the money is going to be worked out, or even more importantly, agreement about how they're going to co-parent the children, it's really hard to do that in the context of what started out as a series of rather, innately insulting accusations of bad behavior.
Well, and the other thing that I find very hard is that what you do is you end up separating finances and children, and somewhere you're going to be sitting here, daggers drawn, saying, right, let's talk about the money, and I'm entitled to kind of stab you as much as I like, emotionally, sort of speaking. And yet we're going to walk into this room here on the left and talk about children. We're going to pretend we're all really nice grown-up adults. We do, right? There's
a lot of unreality in the system. I mean, it's important that finances and children are separated to the extent that people don't try to use leverage on one to sort of gain advantage in the other. Not money for contact, as it were, would be the worst possible sort of dynamic to have in the system. But you're right. There's a huge artificiality between having to pretend to be all sort of lovely and happy for the children, which is good for the children, but then being absolutely at daggers drawn with the money, and it's sometimes difficult to understand how people really feel they can expect to have a relaxed, positive relationship with their former partner when they're sort of doing them harm on one or the other of those fronts.
No, exactly. Well, you and I are going to have a minor divorce because we're just going to have a quick break now.
Okay, very good.
Irresistible. I'm so sorry. My producer thought of it. It's all his fault. When we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit about the whole concept of divorce as a living. Some people actually seem to occupy it as a career. And they're very specialized and seem to be very good at it.
Yes.
So if we can talk about that, we'll be back in a few minutes. This is Living Raw Radio, and I'm your host, Geeta Sidhu-Robb, with the delightful Ayesha Vardag, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Bloated? Is your energy levels really low? Do you find everything that you eat goes straight to fat? My name is Candice, and I am the naturopathic nutritionist at Nosh Detox. I am here to tell you that your body needs a rest. If that sounds like you are ready to try a Nosh juice fast. A juice fast is the most natural way for your body to detox, while providing you all the life-saving minerals and vitamins that your body needs and craves. From beginners to advanced juices, we have all the options that may be available to you or suited to you. Call me on 0845 257 6674 or go to noshdetox.com and click on the right program for you. I'm right here to help you and support you. Thank you.
Nosh Detox is an award-winning company for your ultimate health improvement. Nosh Detox system works on all areas of the body, having dealt with thousands of clients whose health dramatically improved within days. For more details, visit noshdetox.com. noshdetox.com.
Hi, this is Living Raw Radio, and it's Geeta Sidhu-Robb back here with Ayesha Vardag. And we're going to discuss now divorce as a career move. I mean, Ayesha, I know it sounds horrid, but really there are women that I think use divorce as a career move. They use it as they're specialized in it. They know what they can get. They know what they can't get. And they're like piranhas. But they do exist, right?
Yeah, I know that's right. The reality is that the English courts have been so generous to wives that the quickest passport for an attractive young woman to make her fortune is to find a very rich man and marry him and divorce him after a few years, preferably after having at least one child. And it is really the passport to riches and to a very comfortable life for her and for her children.
Well, I want to talk about that for a second, but it seems to me that is also now becoming an issue with men and wealthy women, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There is a rise of what might be described as the gold-digging husband. That's because women are starting to make their own fortunes. They're starting to be leading entrepreneurs and professionals, and increasingly are among the rich of society, and inevitably you have exactly the same trend that we've seen happening for centuries between men and women reversing. So yeah, absolutely, it works both ways.
And I mean, we'll probably see more of that as we see more and more women becoming financially more capable. But what is it about? I mean, London's often described as the divorce capital of the world. I mean, there are people that will absolutely try and get married in other countries in order to avoid the British divorce courts. So, what's your take on that? Why is that? First of all, is that true? And secondly, why is it true if it's true?
It's historically very much been like that. It's very much been true. I think there's been a strong sense in England of marriage as an institution, and how the state has to support that institution and has to look after the women who exit from it. I mean, it's very sort of sweet in a way. It's a very paternalistic approach, which can be rather patronizing and rather disempowering of women. But it's beneficial to the extent that it it certainly gives women big payouts. There was a case just over a decade ago that determined that when a couple get divorced, you have to look at it basically from a perspective of splitting what they built up together 50-50, and it doesn't make any difference who was the breadwinner and who was the homemaker. Marriage is a partnership. Now it's a great concept. It's a really good starting point in so many ways, but it's sort of severely tested when actually you have relationships where there is no partnership. It's a much more exploitative dynamic, and the one is just trying to get something from the other. It was that sense of equality, though, which is so positive, and which resulted in these huge payouts, and has indeed made London the divorce capital of the world. That, and the fact that there's a hugely rich population in London of particularly resident, non-domiciled international people, but of the super rich from every origin, because it's such a melting pot for trade and for finance, and as well as for culture and arts and media. So there's a lot of money here, and a lot of very beautiful people who want to tap into it. and sex is as much a currency as money, and marriage is the way to is the ultimate prize within that particular game.
Wow. That's like really laying it down, frankly, isn't it? So if you aren't married, you can't use that as a currency because you don't have any rights, basically.
Yeah, that's largely right. What you can do if you're not married is if you have a child, then provision can be, well, you have a right to provision for your child, which can result in a lot of financial support for you for the benefit of the child, but obviously you benefit from that yourself. A wonderful house on trust while the child needs to live there with you, and all of that is absolutely designed to look after the child, and it's part of the responsibility that parents have for their children, and consequently to look after whoever's taking care of those children. But that is also something which sometimes someone who's seeking to exploit a situation can use to tap into, to access a more comfortable life for themselves.
But I mean, I think I like that about you, that you have a very clear view on. You're not like, oh, all women are downtrodden and poor them, and not all men are horrible. You've kind of seen both sides of it. So you're quite clear about where it's a transactional arrangement and where it's not. And, not everybody gets that viewpoint. That's quite a unique coverage that you have of the area.
Yeah, I think, I think I've just seen so many relationships play out that it's, and I'm incredibly interested in it. I'm interested in psychology, I'm interested in humanity. Those were always the areas throughout my studies and throughout my life that really intrigued me. And so actually being able to work within that, I'm just very sort of alive to it and just thinking a lot about what I see. But equally, nobody's really an expert. It's all just sort of gut feel for what's happening, the dynamics between people. And sometimes you just can't tell. Sometimes something might look absolutely terrible, but somehow it's working for the couple inside it in a way that nobody else can really understand.
Yeah, there's now just queer as folk or something, I'm sure.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, but so if that's the case, then, I mean, and clearly this is a subject that you're a real expert about, but prenups, and you've been systematic in totally changing this entire arena and changing the law in prenups and everything. I mean, firstly, tell me what you think the good and the bad is of prenups, and then what you think of them for relationships.
Yeah. The bad of prenups is when you have a situation where somebody is pressured into accepting something they don't understand, they don't want, but they feel they have to, their will is overborne, and they then sign up to something that's very disadvantageous to them, and ultimately they are held to leaving them in a situation of real need and real difficulty and great unfairness. That's a very bad result which can occur when you have a prenup. The law in England, the way it is after the case we won in the Supreme Court, isn't working like that. It's more nuanced and more orientated towards protecting the people who go into prenups and making sure that it's fair when they come out. And so that, it's got all of that built into how you apply them. But subject to meeting those requirements, that you weren't pressured into it, and when you come out and you were sort of brought into it honestly and openly, and when you come out of it at the other end, it's not going to leave you in a situation of real need. Subject to that, you now have a setup that works in a very positive way. So the real upside of prenups is it gives people autonomy and the power to agree between them what they want to do in the event that they divorce, or in the event that they break up one way or another. You, at a time that they're both loving and respecting and understanding each other and working with each other cooperatively, they get to make a plan for what they do if it didn't work out. it's so much better than going through the misery of it, getting to the end of things. They both hate each other. They don't trust each other anymore, and it may be that one or other wants to punish the other one for something that they've done that was personal, that hurt them, and trying to fight it out then, and then trying to fight it out through the medium of the courts, who swing in and have the most enormously broad discretion. So they make awards that can seem extremely arbitrary and very unfair, and they're very, very unpredictable. The law is so unpredictable now that it's very hard to settle and to negotiate and agree a deal. So rather than having sat down together and worked out what they're going to do in the event that they break up calmly together as a couple, they just have to hand over this sort of blank check to lawyers and the courts to work out something for them that they're just going to have to live with. And there will be a winner and a loser, and it will be bitter, and it will be expensive, and it will damage everyone. So front-loading the effort onto the beginning of the relationship, having, maybe a few uncomfortable conversations and some tough thinking early on is time well spent to avoid the misery that would happen if the marriage dissolves. And the other really useful thing it does is it gets that couple to confront together what their issues are. What do they think would happen if one of them gave up work? What do they think that would or had a child? How would that impact? What do they think would be fair? How do they value each other's contribution to the marriage? And it's really important to understand where your partner's coming from before you sign up your life or a good chunk of your life to them.
Well,
so it
flushes
like
out
in some cases marriages that shouldn't happen, and the ones that go ahead, that go past it, are that much stronger and that much based on mutual respect.
I don't think you should just have prenups for finances then. You should have them for mother-in-laws, for bedtime.
That would be perfect. For
private versus
absolutely.
Public schools, number of times you have sex in a week. We could prenup the whole thing, frankly.
Exactly. That would be perfect.
I think that was
transparency between people. Transparency, openness, just playing a straight bat. It's just all part of that.
I suppose, but people change so much, Ayesha. What do you do with that? I was at a dinner a week ago, 2 weeks ago, with this couple, and when you get to that stage, sort of really quite late, where people start to tell you all about their private life, and that's the one time you don't want to be sitting next to a warring couple because it's really quite fun. And they had started off, both of them, in banking, and she was earning a lot more, and they did a prenup. This must be now 10 years before, where they said that we'll split everything half and half. And what happened instead was that you fast forward 10 years, and they were just locked in the most bitter, silent battle, which must have been quite bitter because it came out in the middle of this dinner party. And he was now earning 17 million times more than her, and she wanted to have a baby. And because she couldn't do it without his help, as in it wasn't coming naturally, she needed IVF or she needed him to do whatever it was. At this stage, I was trying not to get too involved. But what was basically happening is he was using the prenup to beat her over the head and said, if you want me to do this and you want a child, you're going to have to change the prenup so that you can't take half my money.
Well, in a situation like that,
it's awful.
If your
I felt so bad
husband
for them.
trying to do that to you, is it a good idea to stay married to them? Is it a good idea to have a child at all? That would look like the perfect moment to exit that relationship and try and find somebody who wanted to have a child with her because he loved her and valued her. And
but she was 30. She was in her late 30s or mid-late 30s. You could see that. I said that actually to her. And I said, and he was sort of sitting there, and I didn't really care at this stage because I was like, he sounds like a complete tosser. Why are you trying to do this? And she said, because I feel like I'm so old, I may not find someone to have a child with in enough time, and I've spent 10 years with him.
Yeah, people make those choices and those trade-offs, but frankly, she would have been far better to divorce him then and there, take her 50% with the prenup, and go and get IVF from a donor, or find
a nice man.
Find a nice man with all those millions. Frankly, the world would be no oyster. So I think it's another example of the kind of manipulation and leverage that actually, when people try to exert that, is the warning sign that now is the time you should get out. And divorce is not the worst thing in the world. Living unhappily with someone abusive or exploitative, or who doesn't love you, doesn't care for you, being trapped with somebody who is unkind to you is far worse than going through a divorce, particularly if you can manage a divorce in a way that keeps your children happy and stable and doing okay.
Yeah, but I mean, can you change prenups along the way?
You can change them by consent, and some of them have review clauses built in that they will be reviewed, say every 5 years, and if you don't review them, then they're going to fall away and become invalid, or they might have clauses saying you're going to review them every 5 years, but even if you don't, it doesn't make them invalid. But of course, it's a good idea to review them every 5 years, because the reality is that if you have say you have a prenup that is neither will take anything from the other, they'll just walk away if they get divorced. But so the opposite to the prenup that this dinner party companion of yours had. But then they do go on, so the woman does go on and have children. And at the end of the time, she would be left with, a bit of child provision, but that's it, and he'd have his 17 million. The courts would be very likely to see that as unfair, and so the prenup wouldn't stick and it wouldn't work. And so they would, when couples have those real shifts in what's happening, real changes of circumstance, or they create a dependency one upon the other like that, that's the right time for a review. And if you don't have a review, then you might find your prenup doesn't stick anyway.
So what happens if you go into IVF and you're now allowed to find, I mean, I don't know if there's already been case law for this, so just as a question, just because I found the whole area really fascinating. So you've gone off and you've had your IVF and you have this child, and you are now allowed to find out who the donor father is, aren't you?
Yeah, it's all become rather interesting and rather complex on that. But there are provisions that safeguard, if it's through a clinic, that safeguard the donor father from financial support. Although if you do it informally, then yeah, he's on the hook.
You kind of want to, when your best friend says, "Can I?" you say no.
Yes,
would that be right?
Them over with a bottle of wine and some candlelight, and it might be the best.
And
option.
A turkey baster.
And a turkey baster, yes, or not, depending on your mood at the time.
Yes, no, maybe we're going to get struck off the air. I don't think we should go down.
Yes.
So what are your views on, and I mean you personally, because it is interesting to me, and it never ceases to amaze me how much faith you retain in humanity. I'm not sure how you retain it, but I like that you do. I think that's a positive step. What are your views on this marriage? Would you have a prenup before you got married again? What are your views on all this?
I think I would want a prenup before I got married again, simply because, for all the reasons I've set out. I wouldn't want to put my partner and me, or my husband and me, if I were to marry, through the difficulty and uncertainty of the court. I want us to sort out our affairs between us and sort of privatize it. And I wouldn't want to marry somebody that I couldn't have that conversation with and deal with as an equal fairly, and be able to agree how we wanted to plan things out. So yes, I would very much want to do that. I wouldn't want to kind of, sort of just take a bit of a punt on it and hope it all worked out for the best if it came to it. The reality is that almost half marriages end in divorce now, and the statistics change a bit according to when you marry in life and all that sort of thing. But it is utterly naive to go into something saying, "Oh, I can't. This is definitely going to last forever, so I'm not even going to contemplate what would happen if it ended."
Well, Paul McCartney would be the standard bearer for that, wouldn't he?
Well, yeah, that's right. It's the triumph of hope over experience, and so it just doesn't make any sense. It's like saying, I'm just not going to take any insurance on my house or anything at all around me, because I'm not going to take any insurance for fire, because I'm really sure that my house is never going to burn down. And actually, statistically, you have a lot less chance of your house burning down than of getting divorced. So, it just doesn't. It doesn't. I've actually had my house burned down as well, by the way. So,
oh, God.
So I'm really ticking all the boxes. But
clearly.
But it doesn't make sense not to contemplate that your marriage might end in divorce, and if you know it might, it doesn't make sense to leave yourself at the mercy of the courts. It really doesn't.
And do you personally, would you marry again? Do you believe in it? And if so, why?
I do. Because I absolutely believe that finding one companion that you share everything with, that you are close to, that understands you, that appreciates and admires and respects you, and you really share your daily life with, is the happiest way to live. And it's also the happiest forum in which to build and grow a family, even if it's a combined family. I mean, I'm in a very happy situation of living with someone, with his children and my children, and they've all integrated together. And after many years of tribulation and different, one marriage, one quasi-marriage, I have now found a state of being which is incredibly happy and satisfying and fulfilling.
Yes,
and
I think
so I've got a great deal of faith in it. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think he's lovely. I'm thrilled for you, and I completely support it. One thing though, what about if children got a prenup? Do you know, like now, if you look at it, there's your children, there's his children. Wouldn't it be interesting if children could say, "This is what we'd really like from you"? If they could get rights in that as a process.
Well, it's interesting, but I think the problem with it is it puts a huge amount of responsibility onto children to try to sort of broker and to take a role in relation to their parents. It's one of the most sort of delicate balances, is the sort of the balance between letting children decide for themselves and the balance and protecting them from deciding for themselves.
Yeah.
It's like one of the hardest things for children to do. The last thing you want to do in most situations, I mean, unless there are real problems that children need to talk about because they're being damaged by one or other parent. But in a situation where they've got two perfectly reasonable parents, the worst thing you can do is ask them, well, which one do you want to be with? It's just an excruciating question for a child.
Yeah, no, that's not fair either. I was thinking more in terms of stepchildren. Like when you have, in so many cases, when you have children, especially in today's new families where they aren't the way that we grew up many of us, you end up with step-families and step-sons and brothers and sisters and everything. But so many marriages, when the second or the third marriage break up, and they have a higher statistical probability of breaking up, the step-parents lose contact with the children because they almost don't have any rights, and the children lose contact with the step-parents because they don't have any rights. Shouldn't there be something there?
Well, you can apply for contact, actually. You can apply for parental responsibility. You can apply for contact. So it is possible to do something. If you care enough, you can seek the intervention of the court to generate that contact and keep that relationship going. If you want to, yeah, absolutely, you can. Sadly, so often people don't, and those relationships fall away. But it is possible to fight for them and to achieve them. All these orders for children are done with the welfare of the child being paramount, and the courts understand the value for children of having more people that love them.
Yes, exactly, and being able to contact, because there are so many places where, you've had your like I know my children have had their stepfather for, 7 years odd. That's a long time.
Yes, exactly. Oh, it makes a real bond, and you make a family together, and it would be terrible ever to be parted from those people. So yeah, that is something that one can fight for and one can maintain.
Okay, so just in our last couple of minutes, what if you could wave a magic wand over the way divorces are and the way the law is and everything, what would you like? Say the top 2-3 things that you think it's just ridiculous that this doesn't exist.
I have divorce on demand, that you can start the process whenever one person wants out. You can have divorce on demand without acrimony, without fault, without bitterness.
Would there not be a cooling off period, so you wouldn't think?
Sorry?
Would there not be a cooling off period somewhere where you could think, would it? Listen to me, I sound like one of these people. Would it not make it too easy?
It's not easy anyway, because there are things you have to work out to do with money and to do with children. I'm not saying you just sort of can flick a switch and you're immediately divorced, but and I think the process of having a bit of time from the first stage through to the second stage is a good one. I'm not against a cooling off period, but what I don't want is to have to prove that somebody was at fault.
Yeah.
I think it should be that you can just say, no, it's over. Yeah, build in a bit of time to think about it. But I think people should be able to say it's just not working out and not be forced to stay in unless they can prove that somebody did something bad to them. And so that's I suppose the first thing. I think that the system needs to be made. The system of sorting out finances needs to be made an awful lot faster and simpler, and a lot more people should use arbitration. Actually, there's a as it were, a privatized way of doing it, and plenty of people could afford to use the privatized system of arbitration. It's not actually a lot more expensive, but it would enable these things to get resolved much faster, so they don't drag on, because it's incredibly difficult and painful while they do drag on.
Yeah.
And I think, and the other big thing is I'd have real penalties when people lie or deceive in litigation. I mean, at present the courts are a bit toothless, and there's a lot of notices everywhere about, if you lie on your court forms or you lie in the witness box, then you'll be guilty of contempt of court and you'll be in trouble. But actually, it's completely ineffectual. I mean, there's one chap in prison that we got a committal order on, but it's very, very rare that ever happens, and so it's just all sort of brushed under the carpet, and that's an absolute liar's charter for those who want to get out of their obligations. So I think the court needs to step up and start banging people to rights when they commit what's effectively fraud and lie about what they've got.
Yeah, and I mean I agree, and it seems to be working. There was a case that came out today where properties were and the man said that in fact these properties don't belong to me, and the court found that they did. And so, it is that. I mean, but Ayesha, it's been lovely. I mean, I've really got to let you go, and it has been such a pleasure. I wanted to say that if anybody wanted to find you, that they could go to Vardags.com. Would that be the best place to go?
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. It's VARD.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome, Sudhi. It's VARDAGS.com for the funniest, most stylish, and absolutely most supportive divorce lawyer in town. I go hang out with her just because I like her, and you should try that too. And it's been lovely having you as a guest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
And bye-bye. And this is Living Raw Radio with Geeta Sidhu-Robb, and it's been lovely hanging out with you again. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Detox is an award-winning company for your ultimate health improvement. Nosh Detox system works on all areas of the body, having dealt with thousands of clients whose health dramatically improved within days. For more details, visit noshdetox.com. noshdetox.com.
Do you feel bloated? Is your energy levels really low? Do you find everything that you eat goes straight to fat? My name is Candice, and I am the naturopathic nutritionist at Nosh Detox. I am here to tell you that your body needs a rest. If that sounds like you are ready to try a Nosh juice fast. A juice fast is the most natural way for your body to detox, while providing you all the life-saving minerals and vitamins that your body needs and craves. From beginners to advanced juices, we have all the options that may be available to you or suited to you. Call me on 0845 257 6674 or go to noshdetox.com and click on the right program for you. I'm right here to help you and support you. Thank you.